Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Tonight, I'm really excited to be interviewing Basia Skudrzyk, who is Director of Workforce Placement at St. Patrick's Center. Basia is an interesting person. She hit rock bottom and she got out of it. We're going to talk with Basia about her story on how she got to where she was, why she hit rock bottom, and what she did to get out of it. So stay tuned. She's coming up next. Good morning or good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I am really thrilled, honored, and humbled to have Basia Skudrzyk as my guest. Basia is a dear friend. She's somebody I've known for a while who really is here to talk about her life story, her ups and downs, and where she's at now. There's an old expression that we use, never for the grace of God go I, when you look at other people. Basia, welcome. And thank you for agreeing to appear on my channel.
Thanks for having me, Rudy.
Basia, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, first generation American, born to a wonderful Polish family. I definitely live by my Polish roots. I have two amazing young ladies that keep me moving forward. And, in professional background, I have an MBA in business administration and organizational behavior. I'm currently a doctoral student, soon to start this fall. But my work actually started in finance. I worked at A.G. Edwards as an intern, and then kind of changed tracks by working in hospitality. I worked at the Chase Park Plaza for 8 years, planning different corporate and social events, and then kind of transferred those skill sets in a medical education residency training program. I helped residents achieve their education goals and managed a 3-year residency internal medicine training program that went global, actually. We had sites in 7 different countries in the world. And from there, took a big detour in life. And after coming from that detour, I applied similar skill sets by now working with system impacted people at St. Patrick's Center in St. Louis, helping the homeless and veteran population find jobs when they feel there is no hope. And then on a national level, I work as a program analyst with P2P, Prison to Professional, again, helping returning citizens find education and other opportunities in the workforce.
And we won't name the university where you work, but you worked for a very prestigious university. And that's where things went downhill for you, right?
Yes.
You want to tell a little bit as to what happened?
Definitely. Adam Grant quoted something recently that I kind of wrote down, and he said, sacrificing health and family for work is not an expression of loyalty. It's a sign of poor priorities. And I definitely had extremely poor priorities. I caved in to a lot of pressure. I wanted to perform, and my moral compass weakened because of the choices that I made. So I was to 30 months to a federal prison camp, served a year, a week, and a day, and then luckily completed the remaining time at home under the CARES Act, and was blessed to find employment within 6 weeks of returning home. So that's the general gist of my return back home.
But when you said you lost your moral compass, I mean, what was it that caused you to lose that compass? I know you said family pressure. I remember reading about you. You were in 40 under 40. Looking at you as an outsider, you would think, oh my God, Basia has everything going for her. She's smart. She's charismatic. She's just really got it put together. But what you're saying is that's not exactly the case when you were going through that crisis in your life.
No, I mean, I definitely kept a smile on my face. I tried to stay above water, but when you lack confidence inside and you're afraid to ask for help, on top of extreme pressure to perform and navigate really difficult life events, those environmental factors kick in. I was afraid to ask for help, and that was the problem. If I asked for help and navigated in a way that I should have, I wouldn't have fallen as far as I did.
But the crash came down pretty hard because you had a really good paying job, you had incredible benefits, you were on a track, I think, to be promoted, to
Mhm.
expand your program even more. Then this crisis hits in your life. It all comes crumbling down at that point.
It does. I would say that workplace culture has, a big effect on a person. And that's what happened. I think we kind of talked about this earlier, Rudy. We kind of justify our actions by saying, oh, well, everyone's doing it. And that's not right, obviously. You can't justify situations like that because it's wrong. It wasn't transparent. So at the end of the day, I had to take responsibility for my own personal actions in the situation. And that's where I gained my strength, by taking an inward look as to what I did that was wrong. And that took a lot of strength training, a lot of intrinsic focus on the patterns that I was developing that were not part of who I am.
And what you did was primarily a financial crime. It wasn't anything where anybody was hurt physically. It had nothing to do with drugs. It was just basically a time in your life where you had so much stress, you didn't know where to turn. You felt the duty to perform. When did the reality hit you at that point?
Um,
When you realized, oh my God, you're in the state of denial, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is not good. When did that hit you, and how did it hit you? Did you come to that realization?
I was frozen. I was frozen at the time that it all came out. Again, I was trying to stay calm and navigate. When you're a single mom of two children and your walls are crumbling down and your family's looking to you for support and direction. There were days where I really didn't know how to act. My loved ones were concerned because I just, everyone's like, breathe, it'll all work out somehow at the end. This is just a moment in time, but the pressure's real. And having to digest that and to process that was
Mhm.
extremely difficult. So I would say it just took over me, I would say, through the pre-trial process, discovery from time that I was sentenced to the time that I stepped foot in that federal camp and was exposed to a completely different culture. The legal system is a different culture of itself as well.
Oh
I mean,
yes, oh yes.
new language, new processes. I was never in trouble with the law. So just understanding what all this meant to me was completely foreign. I felt like I was in a different country, having to navigate through different waters and so forth. So on top of learning how to accept this situation, I was also learning how to survive in a new system. And that was very difficult. And however, I feel that with my, professional and personal background, that allowed me to persevere. In addition to my support network, I know that without my family and my friends, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
Well, you and I had talked when this thing first occurred, and I think I've told you before is that, Bosh, I think you're in a state of denial, and I saw that for a while. I think it was until the prosecutor presented the evidence, and it's
Hmm.
there in black and white. You come to the realization, okay, this is real. There's going to be consequences for it. So not now that you know it's real, the other part of the reality that hits is your family, your daughters. knowing that you're going to spend time in an it was a minimum security or medium security facility. That must have been difficult to explain to your daughters and your
Yes.
family that you're going to have to go away for a while.
Yes. For an unknown time. I mean, because
Yes.
you're given a range of, best possibility to worst possibility. So it could have been a year, it could have been 30 months. So the unknown, planning for the unknown is extremely difficult. I mean, as society is navigating COVID right now, there's still so many unknowns, and people are forced to operate in new environments. And that's what we had to do as a family unit.
Well, life is filled with unknowns, and even with the unknown of what's going to happen when they close the doors, and you just can't walk out like you can when you're home.
No.
What went through you there when you realized I'm going to be in a place where my freedom is going to be limited, really pretty much 100%?
Definitely. I told myself that I would not allow my brain to stand still. I'm like, if I have this protective time for myself and then to be in a place such as the one I was in, I developed a schedule. I had a daily routine. And I read every single day. I taught at the education center. I helped women get their GED. Um, I helped people with budgeting, with reading, simple science. I journaled a lot, and I took this time away to develop myself even more intellectually. And I have to say, I was probably in the best shape I ever was in my life. I worked out every day. So physically, mentally, spiritually, I took all those important things that we take for granted on the outside, and I wanted to come out of there in the best way possible.
And prison can be scary because most of us who haven't been only know what we see on TV.
Yes.
Obviously, I used to visit uh, defendants in jail when I did criminal defense work, and I always knew I could walk out. One of my good friends, a St. Louis attorney, used to say he's won every case because he gets to go home afterwards, but his clients are not always so lucky.
Yeah.
So when those doors close and you realize I'm going to be here for a while, what was your first objective? What was your first goal?
My first objective was to stay in communication with my daughters every single day. I had a limit of 300 minutes on the phone every month. So I calculated that easily to 10 minutes per day, which meant 5 minutes per child every evening so that they could hear my voice. I wrote letters, handwritten letters to each of them once a week. And then I had email. But all of that costs, Rudy. I was extremely blessed and privileged to have a support network to put money on my books. Every phone call costs. It's about 35 cents a minute to call back home. It's not free. Video conferences like you and I could do those 3 times a week. So I split that between, my parents and friends and children. But, communication is key. And it was definitely a non-traditional way, but I wanted my children and my family and friends to know that I was still present in their lives, maybe not physically, but in spirit, and for them to at least hear my voice. And, I was there during COVID. So toward the end, I wasn't even able to see anyone for a good 3 months. I had to stay in my dorm. We weren't let outside at all. In terms of working out, I had that routine going on. So we worked out in the laundry room. We had to keep moving forward. And that's where my brain was. I'm like, one less there is one day closer to home, even though I really didn't know what that day would be.
It would be fair to say that your children motivated you. They
Absolutely.
they still need you, whether
Yeah,
you're locked away or not. They still need you.
definitely.
You still had to be a parent to them.
Yes.
And if anything, from my point of view, and you can tell me if you agree, your kids are the ones that I think kept you from really going under.
Absolutely.
You had to be strong for them, even if not for yourself, for them.
For them. And I think the way I navigated and responded to the situation is how they've responded. We grew stronger and resilient together, and that takes a lot of talking. You have to be open. You can't hide anything. And I have to say I have two of the most amazing daughters who have lived through this incarceration together, and my parents, my direct family and friends that I consider family.
I know I am impressed by the support staff you have. You're fortunate in that you get out earlier than
Yes.
expected because of the CARES Act. Now you leave, and all of a sudden, well, another reality sets in. I am a college-educated person with a master's degree. I've had managerial type jobs. Now I have this, felony following me. What was your first step? Before you answer that, the reason I want to get to that is because I'm a big believer that no obstacle is too big. Winston Churchill has a great saying, says success is not final and failure is not fatal. Okay. So you're now at a point where you would say, okay, I failed. Not that I'm a failure, but I failed. Okay. What was the first thing you said you're going to do? I mean, obviously then coming home and hugging your daughters, hugging your family. I'm talking professionally.
Professionally, to get a job. I mean, I still have to pay a mortgage. I still have to feed my children. You have to find transportation. You need to find insurance. All of that is not given to you on the day you leave. You have to recreate yourself and construct a plan to get into the outside world in a sustainable way. And there is no internet on the inside. There's intranet, but there's Google. You can't email your resume to people to start, interviewing on your behalf. I can't have a Zoom call with somebody from the outside to see, if I can get a job the day that I come back. So you have to strategize. I wrote my resume on loose leaf. I send it to my family members and they typed it up for me. But I would say that my planning really occurred prior to my incarceration. I knew I had to plan for best case scenario and then worst case scenario. And, unfortunately, worst case scenario came about, but I had a plan for that already. And I started researching people who were able to persevere and become stronger from similar experiences. And I volunteered in places that had system impacted people coming back home. I wanted to meet with people who were in a system like I was preparing to be in. So I think the more you prepare for that reality, the better you are accepting what you're going into, even though it's still not, it's not like Orange is the New Black. I mean, I watched that and I'm like, oh my God, it's not like that. But, at least you get a flavor of talking to real system impacted people. So I volunteered at the criminal justice ministry, helping people get things like your birth certificate. How do you get your social security card? These are life problems that people don't have when they re-enter because they've been gone for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So how do you start? So that gave me a little insight. But what gave me the most insight was working with women on the inside. I saw a lot of patterns, and majority of them didn't have a reentry plan. So that's what we did together while I was on the inside.
You were helping them build their reentry, so you
Yeah,
were already counseling other residents of the facility
correct.
into having their plan.
So we developed an individual development plan. We put together resumes. We put together cover pages. We did mock interviews. And we actually had the correctional officers coming in to interview them. And, they were extremely nervous, but what better way to prepare than with the correctional officer?
When the person who's guarding you, exactly.
I mean, and then I was the moderator, so I could give them feedback after, these sessions were done. But, they were extremely successful. And I felt that people were starting to build confidence versus even more fear when prepared to come back home. Because as research shows, the recidivism rate's pretty high, in those first 3 to 5 years. People tend to recidivize when they do not have a way to get into employment or housing or transportation.
Well, that's another conversation for another podcast, and that
Yeah,
is what's the ultimate goal of the criminal justice system? Punish, rehabilitate. That's the lifelong debate we've had, and the U.S. probably has more prisons per capita
it does. We're
than
the
than,
highest.
than a number of other countries. We spend a fortune on really incarcerating people, and especially people who commit crimes that really there should be no incarceration for.
Yes, yes.
But
So, Rudy, you kind of mentioned, what were my goals when coming back. And by seeing that environment on the inside, I'm like, we need to change some things to kind of, if people want to move forward and grow and learn from their mistakes, they should have an environment to succeed in. And just because you serve time, that doesn't mean that stigma and those barriers go away, miraculously when you step through your front door. Reality really settles in, when you walk through that door, because now you're confronting your community. You haven't seen people for many years, and you have to find a job, and you don't have the options you would have as a traditional person, applying for a job. So you need to share your story when applying for employment. And again, I
well,
was
well, let me
extremely.
stop you there a second, though, Basha, because I think this is very critical. And a number of people I've spoken to, they have this defeatist, and it's a very negative attitude.
Mhm.
I am, an ex-con. No one wants to hire me. For the benefit of those who are listening, and we're not just talking about people who rob a bank. We're talking about white collar crimes. We're talking about any type of crime you can think of, and they think I'm never going to get that job. From a practical point of view, Basha, how would you tell your story? I mean, if you're talking to somebody, how do you explain this to them in a way that you put the spin? Because obviously you don't want to say, it wasn't my fault. I was innocent. No, 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 nobody believes you. I mean, there are those who've been incarcerated for 30 years and they turn out to be innocent. But overall, people aren't going to believe that. So how do
Society
you?
doesn't. You're absolutely right. So what you do is you share your story on how you persevered, through adversity, whatever type of adversity in your life. You gain strength if you're willing to accept what happened in your life, and you can highlight the tools and your thought process, how you started to think differently, to say, I would be a really good person on your team because of what I've experienced and what I've seen and what I am doing to change some of these things to make the system and the environment better. And I think employers appreciate it. So that's one of the things I started doing at St. Patrick's Center. 70% of our clients have been justice involved, and they usually become homeless because they can't find employment. So we developed this workshop that focuses on sharing your narrative. And, I bring in people who are security at Worldwide Technology, like, he's like, convince me, tell me why I should even think about hiring you. And he's straight up, and he discusses the importance of building trust, and that curve. If you have too much trust, that's bad. And if you don't have enough trust, that's not good either. But if you find that sweet spot, you can start working on building that trust to move
Well,
forward.
but that's the good example of if you say to yourself, I can't because you never will.
Correct.
But if you say, I can, and this is how, then you most probably will. So what it looks like to me at my my end of the table is that experience you had in the correctional facility gave you a perspective that you didn't have before you went in. To me, it caused a shift in your whole professional development, because
Yep.
otherwise, your professional career path was here. Now it's over there. But it's really hard to deal with the programs you're trying to deal with without going through that experience of being system impacted.
Yes.
And I think that if you're talking to a prospective employer, what you're going to say is, yes, I know that I had my downside. I know that I did something I shouldn't have. I've paid my price. I did whatever the justice system told me. But this is what I learned from that.
Yep.
And I don't ever want to go back. And so I am going to move forward. And this is why I'm a good hire for you.
Exactly. I'd hire you, Rudy.
You would hire me?
I would hire you.
I'm too old. No one wants to hire an old man at this point, you know.
Don't ever say no.
Well, I'm not saying no to ever being hired. I'm saying nobody would want to. Now I would have to convince them to hire me. I would have to convince them that why I'm so old, gives me so much experience in that sense. Why it gives me that special knowledge base.
Yep.
Now you work at St. Patrick's Center, so you're now helping people. You're basically paying it forward.
I am.
But you're not paying it forward with family. You're paying it forward with complete strangers. You're paying it forward with people you've never met before. You're paying it forward in a way that you never thought you would, right?
No. But it gives me motivation each day. People ask me, they're like, where do you get all this energy? How do you do all this? And I have to say that, when a person establishes that trust with you and is willing to become vulnerable, it's a gift. And being, in that space to see that transformation is quite remarkable. When you see that person coming in homeless with, despair, feeling life is over, and then seeing them walk slowly and then, eventually jog and run. It's quite a remarkable experience, kind of looking at from a different lens to see that person achieve their potential. And it's with giving them a support network, letting them know that they are worthy, and reinstilling that dignity in a person, because the system completely dehumanizes you. Not having any confidence is quite consistent when you come out of the system, and it still is at times. That stigma, there's a lot of PTSD associated with it, and you see it at all different intervals depending on what a person has gone through.
What do you see is the biggest obstacle facing, say, a number of your clients at St. Patrick's Center? What are the
Sure.
biggest hurdles they have to face?
Transportation is huge. You really can't have employment without not having an opportunity to get there. So we actually developed a rideshare program with Worldwide Technology. So the clients that are working for Worldwide Technology just show up to St. Patrick's Center, and we have a van pool service that actually allows them to drive the van, and it takes them to the site, and then they drive back to St. Patrick's Center. So that's a huge lift from a barrier. They don't have to pay for gas. It's crazy right now. They don't have to pay for insurance or maintenance of the shuttle. They just have to show up literally to St. Patrick's Center, and we take it from there.
To me, the obstacles that I see also tend to be somewhat racially motivated. You've got African Americans who are there who don't have, and I've seen more than African Americans there, but it's a whole group of people that are ethnically mixed,
Mhm.
and they don't have the support system that you have.
No.
Somebody might say, Basia, you're pretty lucky. You had, family, you had a support system, your girls were taken care of. But what would you say to the person who, say, doesn't have any of that? who is oftentimes forced to live on the street.
So their support system is St. Patrick's Center. And, that's what I even said in class today. You just show up because we are your support system. And as difficult as it is, there are steps that you can take to be where I am today. I've had many success stories with clients who thought that they were never going to make it. There's a high suicide rate with people in these situations. I had a client that was a janitor at a library, just finished coding, and now he works for the Department of Defense. I mean, there's some remarkable stories if you allow a person to truly bloom and have that confidence in themselves. And sometimes it just takes a person to check in and say, hey, how are you doing? What are you working on? How can I help you? Do you need to talk? Can I listen to you? And if people know that there are people rooting for them, they will get to that next step most likely.
Well, there are a number of programs available. There's St. Patrick's Centers. There's all kinds of federal and state programs.
Yes, we're working with the Missouri Department of Corrections just for that reason that I shared with you earlier. The reentry phase needs to be improved, and working on a reentry plan while being incarcerated truly allows a person to be more successful and not return versus just, basically throwing a person out on the street.
But the point I'm trying to make with what I said to you earlier is that some people would look at you as fortunate because you already had that. You didn't have to go out and look for it. But the average person that you work with at St. Patrick's Center doesn't have that. And I think that the response to them is, well, there are programs out there, because I don't think St. Patrick's turns anybody away.
No one.
And they turn nobody away. So they're willing to work with everybody. But it's just a question of the person wanting to do it.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. We got friends. It's okay. We've got friends in the background. It's a question of really wanting to do it.
Yes.
If you want to get
your mindset, definitely. So we can give you all the tools and all the resources, but if you're not willing to do your part, it's not happen, right?
Exactly. That's why we have an expression in Spanish: "El que quiere puede." The person who wants can do.
Yeah.
And really, you're not the only person I've known who's come up from these types of obstacles. I've known lawyers who've gone, to the correctional facility and come out, and one's a motivational speaker. I know one person who lost law license, went to jail, and got his law license back as an incredible attorney. Those success stories are there. Too often what we hear about the crimes people commit. We hear about how bad things are. And now we've got this shooting at
Texas.
In Texas. I mean, how can we think of anything else but that at this point? But, not everyone who does something wrong is a career criminal. And given the chance, I think they would like to prove themselves.
Absolutely. And the other organization that I work really closely with is Prison to Professional. And that's exactly what we promote. It's helping people know that they can achieve their potential, because we've all been in their shoes. So what better way to show them success through our own actions? And that allows people to become more motivated.
It does. And also, I believe the lack of money should never be an obstacle for not doing something.
Yeah.
If you work at it long enough, you will get there, and eventually the money will show up. But if you say, well, I don't have the money, so I can't, that's just one more no you put in front of yourself. I'm a big believer that there's two ways you can keep a person in a room. You can lock the door, or you can make them want to stay.
Yeah.
And so one way that you could not progress are people telling you. But the worst way to not progress is you telling yourself you can't.
Yeah. You can be your own worst enemy, for sure.
Exactly. And I did a session on that, on self-sabotage and why we do it. And I see that that's the message you send to people at St. Patrick's Center is, don't sabotage yourself. Yep. And you're there as an example. I got a job. I'm picking my life up. You can do the same thing. And if they don't have the family background that you have, the family support system, then, you know,
Family, honestly, they come to us every day.
but I'm saying is that there are a lot of other programs that they can work with
Step into,
that
definitely.
will help them. And I'm willing to bet you that those programs, and you would know more than I do, those programs are don't have as many people as they would like to have in those programs.
That's true.
I'm sure St. Patrick can service many more people. I'm sure all the other entities can.
Yes, and I think that's where you build trust, because people who are navigating these difficult waters, sometimes they're like, well, that's too good to be true. I mean, we actually provide a stipend for each workshop that a person attends, just to provide a little bit of motivation to kind of get that person through the door. And I see that once that happens, they tell their friends, oh no, for real, there really is a stipend, and they do this and they do this. So we're seeing an uptick in our attendance because now people are getting employed. They see that what we say is what we do, but that doesn't always happen when a person comes back. People are like, oh yeah, I'll help you, and then nothing really happens. So you know it's hard for some people to be vulnerable and to talk about what happened in their past.
Well, you're going to have people in those programs that all they do is make excuses. And
Correct.
you have people in the program that say, I did what I did. It's time for me to move on. How can I set my goals? How can I make myself better?
Definitely.
So, Basha, what's on the horizon for you? You are going to get your PhD
I
in
am.
management.
I'm super excited. I just got my acceptance letter yesterday, so I'll be a doctoral student at the University of Missouri St. Louis in business administration, and super excited to start that new track.
What do you plan on doing once you get your PhD?
I plan on focusing on workforce development. So again, developing these programs that help the workforce. I was part of this convergence conference not too long ago, and we focused on supply chain. And my talk focused on human supply chain. How can we help people get into spaces that traditionally society doesn't really consider? There are over 2 million people incarcerated in the United States. So that's quite a large population that currently is not working, and could be if we were to give them the opportunity. So from what we discussed, the companies tending to move forward are the ones that are not just being innovative, they're thinking differently, outside of the traditional model, by allowing people to have second chances. So that's kind of my motivation, to kind of help companies feel comfortable and equipped with the right tools to provide these environments for people to have a second chance at becoming a professional.
This may sound like a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Because look, it's never fun to be incarcerated, okay? But do
Mhm.
you look at this whole situation as a blessing in disguise in some sense?
Definitely. I think, kind of going back to how did I get myself into that space in the first place, right? Um, I feel that this life event shedded all of that. I am now able to truly be the person that I was wanting to be. I walk lighter now. All that ugliness and pressure and whatever I was kind of going through no longer is part of my life. So, I don't recommend it to anyone, but in certain circumstances,
Hmm.
we have to go through some tragedy to truly realize what we have in life.
Well, rock bottom is a perspective, okay? What's rock bottom to one person is not nothing to another.
Hmm.
Um, but in your world, it's rock bottom, and you're thinking, how can it get any worse for me at this point?
Yeah,
So the only way you have to go is up at this point.
Exactly.
And you've done an incredible job of reinventing yourself, of changing priorities. You're now basically went from business to how do I make the world a better place?
Yeah.
That's your goal.
That's my goal.
And you could have been bitter, you could have been mad, you could have been, a lot of things. But to me, knowing you as I've known you before and after, I see a flower that's just blossomed incredibly, and the world is better for it.
Thank you, Rudy.
Well, thank you so much, Basia. I appreciate you taking the time for this interview.
Thanks, Rudy.
And all of you who are listening, please subscribe to my channel. We're going to have more great interviews from more great people. Thank you so much, Basia. It's been nice talking to you.
Likewise, Rudy.
Bye-bye.